Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back. And also welcome to guests as well who are participating in this part of the agenda. We're now moving on to agenda item 5.6, and this is a panel discussion on the WMO's resource mobilisation strategy and financing partnership. And this session will run for approximately, it was intended to be for 90 minutes, but we're now looking at more like 75 minutes. But we will hear from the Secretariat and from the directors of Cruise and SOF and from member representatives from different regions. And also we're going to gather some donor perspectives as well. We're going to have 2 rounds of question and answers. And of course, we're going to try to ensure we have enough time to get engagement from you, so we can have questions and comments and advice and observations from the floor. But before I start, I am very pleased to give the floor to Professor Saulo to give an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon to everyone. I would like to go straight to the point because this session has a very specific purpose and I want to be direct about it. WMO now operates within a landscape of complementary financing mechanisms: Cruise, SOF, voluntary contributions, the WMO Commons, each with distinct governance, distinct beneficiary relationships, and distinct logics for how resources translate into members' capacity. Some of them are earmarked contributions and governed by the steering committees in which donors and sometimes beneficiaries have a seat. Others operate through more flexible pooled arrangements. What we need to reflect on collaboratively is not the value of each mechanism in isolation. We know there are mandates. What we are seeking for is clarity on how they interact, where they are genuinely complementary, where the risk duplication, where coordination gaps remain that none of them currently fills. And that question has a special dimension that matters. These mechanisms do not operate at the same scale and are not always directed to the same membership. Some interventions land at the national level, building NMHS's capacity, infrastructure, workforce. Others operate regionally, strengthening shared systems and services that no single country can sustain alone. And others still underpin the global observing and data exchange architecture on which everything else depends. The hydrometeorological value chain runs across all 3 scales, and financing that is well designed at one level, if that financing is well designed at one level, but can undermine by gaps at the other. And that is what we need to pay attention to. Today, you will hear from beneficiary countries and from donors, and of course, from the directors of the different initiatives. I encourage you to listen with a specific question in mind. At what point in the value chain did the intervention land? At what scale? How can members benefit from and contribute to? I want to thank our panelists for their willingness to share their experience and the DPPD team for organizing this panel as well. These are not easy questions, and their perspectives from both sides of the financing relationship are exactly what this council needs to hear. With that, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Saulo, for setting the scene and for your reflections and raising the issues that hopefully we'll be able to address in depth during these 2 panel discussions. First of all, I'd like to actually introduce our panelists. First of all, I'm pleased to introduce you to Mr. Daniel Cull from the WMO, and we have Mr. John Harding from Cruise. We have Mr. Marcus Repkin from SOF. We have Mr. Evan Thompson who is, as we know, president of a regional association, but also representing Jamaica as well. Then we have Ms. Arlene Lang, who's representing the CMO and as a member of the Executive Council, but also representing British Caribbean territories. Then we have Mr. Fentany from Ethiopia, President of Regional Association, Ms. Tadiga from Burkina Faso. Very glad to have you there. Ms. Siwu from Canada, and also Professor Martin van Aalst from the Netherlands. And of course, we'll be hearing from them during the different Q&As and the different roundtable discussions that we'll be having over the next while. But to help us navigate today's discussion, we'll first need a clear picture on the WMO financing and partnership ecosystem. And I'm now inviting Daniel Cull, who's Director of the Development Partnerships and Programme Development Division here within the WMO, to provide that overview. Over to you, Daniel.
So thank you very much, Ewan, and it's good to be here. So let's start with the first slide. If you could please go to the next slide. Remembering what the WMO resource mobilization strategy is all about. What is the vision for WMO resource mobilization? And I want to make it clear that, of course, we're talking about voluntary contributions here, or extra budgetary funding. As you can see from the vision of resource mobilization, it's about funding, but it's also about partnerships. And it's about effective support to our members and leveraging the partnerships, recognizing that WMO has a key role to play, but we are a small technical actor in a large sea of big financial institutions. So just as a reminder that our vision is to really mobilize voluntary contributions and partnerships and effectively leverage them in a cooperation with all of our stakeholders to help you, the members, better provide weather, climate, and water-related environmental services. Next slide, please. What does that mean? What is the ecosystem that WMO is operating in? So you can see WMO mobilizes resources from a range of different funding sources, from multilateral development banks, other UN agencies, climate funds, other strategic partners, donors, so members, there's many of them in the room here, and increasingly foundations, philanthropies in the private sector. I would highlight here that within this sort of broad landscape, under the climate funds, we have, of course, CRUISE and SOF. CRUISE supporting WMO projects. For SOF, as you know, we serve as the technical authority, and of course, WMO is a co-founder of SOF. All of the funding that we mobilize from these sources goes into our projects and technical assistance to the members, whether through direct project implementation or through other partnerships. It also supports the voluntary contribution program, which I'll talk a bit more about later. At least the funding from bilateral donors goes through there from members. And now coming into the WMO Commons, which I'll go in a bit more detail about. But I think the critical point here is that we pull together these different sources of funding. We coordinate the inputs that we receive from them to really support our members, all of you, in terms of strengthening your capacities and services, as well as the WMO programs which ultimately support you. Next slide, please. So you've seen this figure already a few times, I believe, during this EC, that currently our project portfolio stands at 68 active projects with a total volume of about 144 million Swiss francs. I think something important to note, and really the key point for me on this slide, is first of all that our pipeline is growing. So we are expanding and scaling up our project capacity, and therefore the number of projects we're able to deliver, as well as the size of the projects. But also the landscape of where we mobilize the funding from is actually somewhat dynamic. So in the current situation, we receive similar amounts of funding from the climate funds and bilateral donors, but that's changing as we see in the next couple of years, that most likely the funding will be more and more from the climate funds. So that's, of course, CRUISE, and now we're talking about projects specifically. CRUISE, Adaptation Fund. I think you previously heard we're in the accreditation phase for the Green Climate Fund. We've also submitted our first proposal to the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. So that's an increasing portfolio. We also have an increasing portfolio with foundations and philanthropies. A few years ago, we were not receiving any funding from those kind of private sources, and that's a growing area of interest and success for WMO to mobilize support. And then we have some other smaller sources of project funding, which remain critical, however. Next slide, please. Now, each of these different financing mechanisms, of course, come with their own structures, as Celeste mentioned, also with their own steering committees or governing boards. But we try to leverage the different opportunities they provide in a way that makes sense for our members and for the capacity and the support that we can deliver as WMO. So for crews, there's, of course, the classic, if you will, multi-year projects that can be either country level or regional level at different funding volumes. The accelerated support window, which allows for small scale, quick support to really advance key priorities. And now the GCF and cruise scale-up mechanism, which can have fast track funding from the Green Climate Fund. And again, we are in the process of accreditation. Another example, the Adaptation Fund. There's different approaches and thresholds for regional projects as well as national projects. One thing to highlight is, given how the WMO system works, how all of you work together under the WMO umbrella, we prioritize regional projects because they are much more effective and efficient to supporting members to also work with each other and ensure that peer support is in place. I would also mention that, of course, some of the newer funding mechanisms from which we receive financing, for example, the philanthropies and foundations, have their own modalities and ways of doing business, and we are adapting and making sure we are well suited and have the capacity to align with their approaches. Finally, we're also putting a lot of effort into enhancing the donor intelligence to support members and helping members themselves mobilize resources from the national level as well as from the global level. Next slide, please. I previously mentioned the voluntary contribution program. This is a relatively small program, but it's actually been around for decades, and it really leverages the solidarity we have among all of you, among members, where if a member needs urgent support for something relatively small, we're able to mobilize twinning support. In some cases, it's pro bono. In some cases, it's co-financed from the VCP funds. And you can see some examples of the kind of activities that the VCP supports. These are often in alignment with bigger WMO projects and help to fill perhaps small gaps to really have a bigger impact of the overall project. But it's a very agile and flexible approach that really builds on the solidarity of our membership. Next slide, please. You've now heard several times during this EC about the WMO Commons. This was launched a month ago at the Climate Week Zurich. I think something to highlight is that the real focus of the Commons is to strengthen our global functions, our global support systems, our global coordination systems. So you see on this slide several different pathways of investment, but the priorities are really pathways 1 and 2, which is the global functions that are critical for all of you to do your business and for the global observation and forecasting system to be effective. Next slide, please. Just quickly, an overview of the Commons. It's a WMO managed pooled funding mechanism. It, of course, accepts voluntary and critically unearmarked funding. So if someone comes to us and wants to invest in a specific topic or country or region, that is not a Commons contribution, that is a project. So the Commons is, this has to be very clearly stated, is unearmarked. And it accepts funding from members such as yourselves, as well as from philanthropies, foundations, multilateral institutions, and private sector actors. Again, it supports our functions that sustain, strengthen, and modernize the globally mandated backbone and system enabling functions of weather, climate, and water intelligence. As you may have heard, we are trying to target 100 million over 5 years, trying to be very ambitious, but we need ambition because our role and all of your roles are so critical to the global public good. And again, we really acknowledge with great appreciation the contribution from the United Arab Emirates, who have already put in the first 1 million and who have committed to put in another 1 million by the end of the year. Some of the key elements in the WMO Commons is the fund itself, of course. There's an annual work plan, which I'll talk a bit more about on the next slide, an advisor group, and an annual meeting. So if we go to the next slide, what I want to highlight is that the Commons will be used to augment regular budget. So therefore, it will be the decision on how to disperse Commons funding will be based on our strategic objectives, on the annual operating plan, and are fully aligned with, of course, what the membership is guiding us to do. So we identify the technical priorities. We develop a Commons work plan, which identifies for the next year where we're going to disperse and deploy Commons funding. There will be an advisory group of the bigger donors to the Commons, and we plan to have a meeting with them every September during New York Climate Week, where we will share the draft work plan for their information. They're free to make comments, but they have no decision authority. They're obviously not in the governance, nor can they tell us how to spend the money in the Commons. Rather, we want to hear from them what they observe in terms of ongoing priorities and system gaps and sort of future needs, but they will not have an impact on how we disperse the funding. It'll then come back to the WMO for the institutional approval and eventual implementation. And the results reporting will be aligned with our standard approaches to reporting, financial as well as activity reporting. With that, I'll hand it back to the chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And so I'm going to ask Daniel and John Harding and Marcus Rifkin to form a mini discussion roundtable focus group now. And we're going to concentrate on the matter of complementarity when it comes to funding mechanisms. And the process we're going to follow is we have a series of questions which we've pre-prepared, which hopefully we'll be able to put on the screen there, please. And we will give one question per roundtable member. And so starting with SOF and then moving to Cruise and then moving to the WMO Commons. And the questions will be up on the screen so you can see them as they're being asked. And then we'll ask one collective question to this mini roundtable here, focusing on the complementarity or otherwise of funding mechanisms. So while we're waiting, the first question is going to be given to you, Marcus. And the question is, so what is the role of developing countries in closing global basic observation gaps, and how does SOF support them, Marcus?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The role is essential, is foundational, which brings us back about the value proposition of SOF. SOF is not about charity. SOF is about investing where it matters most, in the data-sparse regions of our planet. According to our friends from ECMWF, an additional radio sound data point from the Pacific values 50 times more than an additional radio sound point here in data-rich Europe. So the first message is SOF intervenes to the question of the Secretary General at the very first part of the value chain, supporting developing countries with a particular focus on LDCs and sits on closing this data gap. As the data from developing countries are so essential, not only for the countries themselves, but for everybody, SOF provides long-term, open-ended support. Grant funding only, results-based funding, and peer-to-peer technical assistance. Actually, we have 10 representatives of countries providing peer advisory services here. And very last point, it's also about justice, because we're set up by Congress to support countries on achieving G1, Global Basic Observing Network compliance. All countries are equal. All countries have the same obligation. But if you compare Switzerland with Kiribati, a Pacific island nation, and if you look at the GDP per square kilometer to be observed, Switzerland has 254,000 times more economic means. This means SOF provides long-term, open-ended support, peer-to-peer support for countries to deliver their share, and the main message to close: developing countries are committed to deliver their share of data. The question is, how speedily can we respond? Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Long-term, open-ended support and a commitment to sharing data. Absolutely excellent. Our next question is for John Harding, who I'll remind you is the Director of the Climate Risk and Early Warning System, Cruise. John, Cruise was set up to channel climate finance to close the early warning capacity gap in LDCs and in SIDS. So what is working well and where are the gaps and what are the main priorities if we're looking into the future? Over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to WMO for the invitation to join this panel. I believe it's the first time that cruise is on the agenda of the Executive Council, so I'm particularly happy because the work of this body, of course, guides a lot of the work and the technical assistance we provide to members. So when we're talking early warning financing, I think we can safely say that now early warning systems have very much become a frontline policy globally, and even more so for some of the countries which are on the front line of the climate crisis. And this recognition actually has been growing since 2015, first with the establishment of cruise, and then more so with the establishment of the Early Warning for All initiative. So how is this visible? If you look, for example, the global goal on adaptation now has put a lot of priority on early warning system. What that means is that we will now be able to quantify how our collective work contributes to efforts to adapt to climate change. And we're also seeing that, in some of the more difficult multilateral agendas and environments, early warning is one of the topics where we've seen countries that actually managed to converge. Last year on the G20, under the South Africa presidency, there was a strong priority put on early warning systems. More recently, the G7 in Paris at a meeting of development ministers, resilience, early warning, and cruise was also put on the agenda. So, I mean, what does these development mean for our collective efforts and for crew? And it's mostly positive. It's because of this higher visibility on the agenda that we're able to have a dedicated financing mechanism, such as cruise, which is administered by the World Bank. Is what allows us to provide these longer-term technical assistance through our projects to the members. It's also, as Daniel mentioned, we're able to respond much more rapidly. We have a small grants program. We call it X-ray support window to immediate needs that members may have. But importantly, it's also helping us facilitate access to climate funds. And as mentioned, we have this agreement with the GCF, which facilitates for members. Actually, 14 members are currently in the process of preparing project proposals for 25 million each under the GCF cruise scaling up framework. And of course, if WMO is successfully accredited to the GCF, this will even increase further the impact of this in this space. But on the other hand, we should also recognize that higher profile also brings some challenges, multiplicity of initiatives, risk of duplication. We're dealing with new actors, humanitarian actors, and there's also a high level of scrutiny on our work. We higher accountability, and we're going to need to collectively get better at defining success and measuring it. So those are the aspects that I think we are very much looking at to this body and on our collective work moving forward to address some of those challenges. And of course, we'll try and play as much as we can our part on this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Right then, so next we move to the WMO Commons, and as we've heard from Daniel, and congratulations to everybody in the WMO with the launch of the Investor Forum in 2025. And it has already attracted the first pledge. So thanks to United Arab Emirates for their generosity. So my question is, based upon your discussions and engagement with donors and partners, Daniel, what aspects of this new model have generated the greatest interest and engagement?
So I think what's been interesting to observe is, I mean, the Commons serves two purposes. One is, of course, fundraising, but it's also the advocacy side and the outreach side. And that has been where we've seen the most success so far, particularly with the private sector, whether those are corporate actors or foundations and philanthropies. And it's to sort of quote what the president of CIRCOM said this morning, the fact that all weather and climate intelligence is based or depends on what WMO does invisibly in the background. Getting that message out has been a really important factor for the Commons so far. And I talked to a lot of companies and a lot of foundations, and of course, they're not in our community. They don't understand how the system works. But to learn of this critical critical dependence on WMO and on WMO members is an eye-opening experience for them. And I think this is where it's generating a lot of interest in terms of they see that what we do is so important for them to protect their investments, to ensure economic growth and stability, to protect the sustainability of their business models. And interestingly, for example, last week I was at a workshop with the European Central Bank. I also had a call with the Bank for International Settlements. Those who are really challenged with the stability of the global economy are realizing how much rests on what all of you do and what WMO coordinates. And I think the Commons has been key to opening that conversation for them to understand what we do and how important we are. It's also presenting sort of ideas for business models that are dual purpose. For example, with the private sector in particular, of course, a company that depends on weather and climate intelligence, they then recognize that better forecasts, better data help them in their business. But they also recognize that supporting that helps the global public good. And so helps in terms of global growth and stability, helps within their own sector. And the companies I talk to say, look, of course, we're in a competitive business, but we want everyone to benefit because the more stable and more reliable our sector grows, the better we can do as a business. So it's that sort of dual business case of their own interests, which is fair, but also the global public good and to contribute to overall global stability and growth. And I think that's where the Commons has been opening a lot of interesting doors and conversations.
Thanks very much, Daniel. So I'm not going to pose one question to all three of you, and if you don't mind, I'd ask you to give your individual answers. So we've heard a description of, and you've been talking about, we have three different finance mechanisms, and they represent distinct models and, in a sense, distinct value propositions. How do these different approaches work together? And it's as this is the purpose of this roundtable discussion, it's complementarity. So how do these approaches work together in practice and in supporting countries while at the same time avoiding risks like fragmentation or confusion at a national level? So who'd like to take the floor first in relation to that question?
Let me start again on this. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I think three messages. First, no SOF without WMO. SOF is a foundational WMO funding mechanism established at the request of Congress, with WMO playing very different role, from governing bodies to the Secretariat providing technical authority overview. Second, no observations, no forecasts. SOF operates at the very first part of the value chain, as I mentioned, and there are huge data gaps. But third, SOF depends on an effective division of labor and collaboration. Because even if all developing countries are able to close the data gap, this is not sufficient because data need to lead into effective decisions. As the Secretary General today at the presentation of the Cruise annual report, you were referring to Malawi. And I think Malawi is an excellent example on how we are working together. SOF, Cruise, Med Norway, ECMWF, and other partners. So for us, it is essential. On the other hand, we provide an input for those intervening at the latter part of the value chain.
Who's next?
Thank you. And you'd be surprised to know how often I'm asked, what is the relationship between SOF and Cruise? Actually, it's one of the questions I get asked the most often. And yes, of course, SOF, Cruise, and now the Commons. We're competing for the same funds. If you increase the number of financing tools, it reduces the funds available for each and increases costs and overheads. That's simple maths. But I think the real question is the question that the Secretary General asked at the beginning of this session is what is the opportunity cost provided by the respective added value that each one of us bring? And I don't have a clear answer to that. I think it's also for you, the members, to answer that question. But I think that's how we should be. That's the questions that we should really be asking ourselves. And for me, the biggest challenge actually remains more in what I call managing the global narrative in this space. So if you ask Marcus, he will tell you the most important thing to finance is weather stations. Now, if you ask other parts of WMO, they will say actually it's more early warning services. And if you go beyond WMO and you ask the International Telecommunication Union or other parts of the value chain, they will have very different answers. And of course, each one of these answers are right. Every single one of those aspects is very important. But obviously, what we need to be able is to speak from the same song sheet and have a robust evidence driven by the needs defined by the countries and the members that actually informs our financing. So let me just finish with two things on this point. First, I very much echo what Marcus said. In order for cruise to be successful, we need effective and fully funded WMO. And the effectiveness of our operations in countries requires a WMO system, what the so-called backbone, which is operational. The global and regional centers have to be set up and effective. We need the norms for data exchange and so on and so on. So these need to be funded, and the common becomes an important vehicle for us to be able to be successful as well. And the second point is that programmatically, you can rely on Marcus and Marcus's team and Cruise and the Cruise team to ensure a very robust programmatic alignment between our initiatives. So we avoid any overlaps from the pipelining all the way through to the way we account for impacts. We build on each other's initiatives. And you don't have to believe Marcus or me. We're very open to scrutiny, and we have a number of external evaluations that say the same thing. But what the bottom line here is that we want you to feel comfortable that we're doing our part to really minimize any duplication. We reduce overheads, and we're trying to contribute to a coherent support agenda for the WMO members.
Thank you very much, John. Daniel.
So thank you very much. I'm not going to repeat what my colleagues have said, but I mean, together we support different parts of the same value chain, as John highlighted, from observations to forecasting to warnings and services within a globally connected system. And of course, the WMO role is that globally connected system. And as John and Marcus rightly pointed out, without that global public backbone that WMO coordinates and the WMO Commons helps to support, SOF and Cruise would not be able to deliver the great work that they deliver. Just to highlight at the country level, it's not about the commons, but rather about the WMO projects, which are largely funded by Cruise, but also funded by Adaptation Fund, some members who are here today, and some other funding mechanisms. And I think that critical coordination function at the country level, which is of course led by the member of that country, the NMHS in the country, WMO strives to deploy its project resources to ensure that coordination, to fill gaps in the coordination, because of course, many countries need very large investments, which are beyond the scope of WMO, but we're there to make sure that those investments make sense, are aligned, and are really for the best value for our member in that country. So it's the WMO role in that case at the country level is about smaller activities that support bigger investments and help to advance the Met service of that country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, Daniel, and Marcus. So we've heard a lot here from our roundtable participants, and now it's time for you to ask any questions or maybe provide any comments or observations that you might have. So the floor is open for any interventions you'd like to make and maybe address at our roundtable representatives. So the floor is open. Right then, thanks very much. Well, I think it's been a very comprehensive summary. Clear from what I take from this discussion, I will say is the centrality of the WMO. And yes, there are different mechanisms. There are different there's a different focus within the different distinct funding containers that you have. But the WMO's representation and its function and how it contributes locally, nationally, regionally, its coordination function, its operational backbone approach and essential nature of its behavior, and then the standards and regulations that the WMO provides globally to maximize interoperability and the scientific value of what we produce is a fundamental foundation to the remarkable achievements that the three of you have already have through your organisations. So thank you very much. You're doing good work, and it is inspiring to see the vision and the strategic goal and the promise that your activities give us. And we wish you every success, and we wish you a fair wind as well to everybody in the WMO Commons, but not just WMO Commons, our two colleagues here from Cruise and SOF. So we might give them a round of applause, please. Thank you very much. Right then, so next we're going to move on to more concrete examples and some shared by our members through a second roundtable of questions. And here we're going to be talking to Thomas Evan, who, as I mentioned, is permanent representative of Jamaica, and Arlene Lang, who's permanent representative of the British Caribbean territories. And again, I'm going to ask both Evan and Arlene to address one particular question, if that's okay. So the first question really is, look, developing operational capabilities takes years of continued investment and technical cooperation. Would you mind sharing with us how the different projects implemented in previous years and the international technical coordination has helped you build operational capabilities to face challenges, for example, like Hurricane Melissa? Evan.
Okay, well, since you started with Hurricane Melissa, I think that's my name because Hurricane Melissa is one experience that Jamaica had that we will never forget. I am from Jamaica. Jamaica is only about 11,000 square kilometers in size in the middle of the Caribbean Sea, one of the small island developing states. And so we have many demands for the resources that are available in our country. And sometimes one single event can wipe out so much of the work that we've done over so many years. Hurricane Melissa, as one hurricane that moved across Jamaica last year and only impacted half of the island, but it also wiped out half of our GDP, or gross domestic product. Over half of it, 57% of the gross domestic product of the island was devastated because of that one event. And sometimes we go about, we have resources in place and we think we're doing pretty well, but then when you have to work out all the very many demands for those resources, sometimes finding actually prioritizing some of these needs that are addressing maybe the instrumentation or early warning systems in the country, sometimes those get relegated to second, third, fourth place when you think about the budget that we have to be designing every year. So in Hurricane Melissa, we were able to see the impact of so many of the outputs that we have actually obtained under Cruise in particular, because we have had some experiences with Cruise. Cruise has been a remarkable partner over years. And in recent times, we had a few projects that we recognized that we really benefited from those as we went through the hurricane, particularly with respect to the communication that we had to be engaged in with respect to Hurricane Melissa. How do we warn our people? The early warning system was really critical during that time. And I must say that at the end of the event, Jamaica and the Meteorological Service came out with flying colors. And that was mainly because of some of those products that we were able to deliver. For instance, one of the things that our population really wanted to see was what is really happening on the ground. You know, sometimes the trust deficit is there. They may have numerous sources of information coming in on the internet, and they wonder what is the credible place to get the information. But the Meteorological Service was able to be upfront and present in everyone's home, multiple times every day, just letting them know what they should expect from this hurricane. And when they were able to look on their website, on the Meteorological Services website, and see the movement of the system because of access from the seeing what was coming from our meteorological radar, that was able to ground truth what we were saying. They believed what we were saying. They could see the movement that we were telling them about. And then that made it so much more real to them. And Cruise was very instrumental in providing the resources that allowed us to get those images back on our website. In fact, to restore the website to where it was. You know, sometimes the demands for the resources are so many. And so some of the things that you think are important, you really are not able to achieve. And having that in place was one thing. But we also had on our telephones, on our mobile phones, the weather app, the Jamaica weather app. Now, this is something that I understand that Cruise has been talking about. You know, sometimes when Cruise is doing their promotional activities, they would show what occurred in Jamaica because of the establishment of the Jamaica weather app, utilizing the capacity that the meteorologists, the forecasters actually have in presenting these forecasts and having it over a period of time. So Cruise was one of those entities that really got involved with helping us to achieve the development of that website. And so those are really just two examples. There are so many other ways that we've benefited from Cruise interacting with us. And those were two incidences, two of the outputs that we are able to share that really helped us as we went through the hurricane. On that Jamaica weather app, they could see an image of Jamaica. They could see the areas that were most at risk with color coding. And so there was a lot of information that was being passed on to them in a graphic way. It didn't require too much educational insights to be able to interpret the images that they were seeing. And it was really impactful for them to know what to expect in the short term. That's what an early warning system is all about.
Thank you, Evan, for that illuminating personal account of Storm Melissa or Hurricane Melissa. And you really touched on trust and the authoritative voice and the understandability of information, and for people to really see and have that visceral connection to what is really happening, and how nevertheless, in peacetime, during times when we don't have storms, things can be regulated. Resources and the application of resources can be regulated to lower priorities. But Cruise here has actually really benefited and underpinned the success story and the avoidance of loss and protection of public safety that has been exemplified by your experience. So thank you very much. Over to you, Arlene.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could I have my slides up? Thank you so much for inviting me to speak. I am going to share a few examples from the Caribbean, small island developing states. Cruise Caribbean has strengthened the hydrometeorological services and our operational capacity over a number of years. And I'm citing a few examples. One, the WIS-2 and the Common Alerting Protocol. There's been training and implementation of both in the Caribbean with the support of Cruise. We've established, with the support of the WMO Infrastructure Division, a WIS-2 node in October 2023, following training that was done in June 2023. And we just recently had an additional WIS workshop in Port of Spain last week. We have also had assistance with governance, development of strategic plans and national frameworks for weather, water, and climate services in our member states. And through those mechanisms, we've not only improved the operations of the Met services, but having those governance documents and those processes in place have allowed the National Met and Hydrological Services to connect to national climate financing, in some cases being able to nationally be part of GCF readiness funding. And most recently, we, as the Caribbean Meteorological Organization, have been leading a regional project which was approved by the Green Climate Fund through the Cruise Scaling Up framework that is especially aimed at scaling up the hydrometeorological early warning services in Belize and Trinidad and Tobago. And we are being assisted by the Caribbean Development Bank as the accredited entity. The activities with regard to governance have been in place since 2021 with the first Cruise Caribbean project. We've also done advancements in impact-based forecasting and early warning communications with work that was done this year. We had a pioneering workshop with Met Services, Hydrological Services, National Disaster Risk Management organizations, and the media coming together to develop mutual understanding and enhancing their collaboration for early warning communications. And that has then been followed up by some national workshops following the success of the regional workshop. There are pictures on the side that show some of that activity. The second picture from the top is actually, if you were following the WIS node that we have established, you would have seen in real time, those are the observations from the station in Montego Bay, Jamaica, where you see the reduction in the pressure actually with the passage of Hurricane Melissa. And in the upper right-hand corner, that's the island of St. Lucia issuing their first CAP alert in November last year following training and implementation. The third picture is our CDB representative at the GCF making the case for us to be funded. And the other picture at the bottom there is from the Turks and Caicos Island recent national workshop on communications, which brought together public media, private media, and disaster risk management with Turks and Caicos meteorological officers. Through the VCP and the cruise, we've also had pioneering leadership and management training for directors and senior officers that was held in December 2025. And I want to thank the Korean Meteorological Agency here. There's a photograph at the bottom there of the group. And additional VCP funding and cruise has also allowed us to deliver on something that was outstanding for a while, and that was quality management training and certification in the Caribbean that had been in long demand. And through those funding mechanisms, we now have certified QMS auditors in our region available to help others. We've also been developing in 2024, we had funding, especially through the VCP and with the assistance of the Korean Met Agency as well. We had advancing in our numerical weather prediction capacity. And I want to say that the QMS was also additional help through Canada, and their support to the VCP was very instrumental in that way. Can we move to the next slide, please? So one of the things I want to make the case of too is that we're not only looking externally for funding, but within our own region, we have a lot of regional cooperation where we work together to help ourselves. And then because we're working so well together to help ourselves, we're able to make a more effective case for assistance globally. And one of the mechanisms that we do is that all of the members of the Caribbean Meteorological Organization contribute to a small fund that supports the host countries of the radio sound stations and the radars. And those are considered to be joint facilities of all members. And so one of the ways that Jamaica's radar was able to be repaired after having been out of commission for a while was to allocate funds for that repair. And this was done in June 2025 in time for Melissa to be adequately monitored to assist with the forecasting of Melissa. We also had a case of quick repairs that were needed in the Belize radar. And in this case, we intervened on behalf of Belize and sought support through the cruise that was able to provide quick intervention to get training and repairing done for the Belize radar in October last year. We have also a Caribbean operational radar group, and this is a community of practice that assist each other. It includes radar technicians as well as IT personnel, and not only from CMO members, but we have participation from other Caribbean states, from Meteo France, from Curacao, from the Bahamas, and we bring in experts sometimes to talk about what are the best ways to do remote monitoring of the radar systems. We have examples from the members themselves talking about troubleshooting activities that they've done to solve maybe interference or what are the best ways to archive data. This is an amazing group of folks. They meet at least 4 times a year and they are also connected with each other through social media to, if something comes up and they need rapid help. We also link within our region to other sectors that are climate and weather sensitive. And we have a regional early warning systems consortium that is led by the Caribbean Disaster and Emergency Management Agency, or CDEMA. They also lead a Caribbean Development Partners Group that comes together when there is something affecting the region, and they have a cohesive response referred to as the Regional Response Mechanism. And they receive a lot of support from development partners in Europe and other places. And there's private sector engagement as well with disaster risk management. Just last week, we had a UNDRR sponsored webinar with the private sector, small and medium-sized businesses as well. And we have an early warning information systems across timescales that is led by the Regional Climate Center at the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology, which is a technical organ of the CMO. And they interface and co-develop and co-design climate products with tourism organizations, water resource management, a host of others, energy, renewable energy, public health, and as well as disaster risk management, of course, and agriculture. So these are some of the examples that we have. You'll see the pictures on the right showing the radar in Jamaica operating, showing Melissa, and our regional mosaic of basic reflectivity there showing the coverage for Jamaica. That is not only cooperation from the Caribbean, but also more recently, we've had addition of radar data from South America, and we'd like to thank our partners in South America also and Central America for providing those. So that's my example. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Arlene. And reflecting on what you've just said there, it's quite striking to see how the support and the engagement and the partnership and the cooperation with crews really kind of triggered this, catalyzed this virtuous cycle of enabling and leveraging local capability and expertise, and fostering that regional cooperation is really a wonderful thing to be seeing. Another reflection, just thinking immediately in relation to this presentation, is the huge real-world impact that this engagement and this intervention in your Met Service is extraordinary. National Meteorological Services, we take science and technology and cooperation and funds, and then we apply it directly in a very challenging real-world setting, where on a day-by-day basis, everything we do is tested and verified. And it's the ultimate form of accountability, but it's the ultimate form of impact. And the stories you've told in relation to the repair of the radar and how it was done just ahead of Hurricane Melissa, and how we've just seen a picture of the first CAP alert, is it from Belize? That's hugely inspirational. And then the direct impact of broadening and deepening the technical capability and knowledge within your region through training in WIS and CAP and QMS. It's really a huge amount of information and a huge achievement to you and your partners. So thank you very much. And thanks again to Evan for your illustration of the real world impacts of life-saving measures that have been taken. So thanks, Evelyn. Thanks, Arlene. Next, we're moving on to a second block of roundtable discussions. We're going to be looking at Africa now, and we're focusing on leveraging multiple funding streams, and we're investigating how that might work. So we're going to invite Fentane, and we're going to who's the permanent representative of Ethiopia, and of course we have Miriam Tidiga as well, who's the permanent representative of Burkina Faso. And again, I'm just going to give both of you one question, and I'm going to leave it to you individually to answer the questions. So Ethiopia and Burkina Faso have both drawn on multiple funding sources, including CRUISE, SOF, the GCF, and also bilateral partners. And the question is, how did combining and leveraging different financing mechanisms help you advance compliance across the hydrometeorological value cycle and strengthen your institution? Oh, Fenton is going first.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, Moderator, for this very important question. As it is well known, the Greater Horn of Africa is affected by weather and climate-related hazards, which include drought, flood, landslide, and heat waves. This affected most of the Greater Horn of Africa. Therefore, Ethiopia has progressed in strengthening the hydrometeorological services has been driven by strategized and diversified combination of financing mechanism. So resource mobilization from working with different development partners is very important to overcome such kinds of weather and climate-related hazards. In addition to this, it is very important to be supporting by a strong national commitment is also very important, and so that we believe that solidarity and cooperation and collaboration with different partners is very important. So from this point of view, the SOF project can play a very significant role to strengthen the observation network, particularly land station, and the upper air observation is very important. So having a good and a significant data or observation network by itself is not sufficient. Therefore, if we have no data, there is no the climate services. So to provide timely and accurate weather and the climate services for communities at a grassroots level, as well as for to provide advisory services for decision makers, having a strong station network, a strong observation network is very important. Therefore, so from this point of view, is implementing in the field the gaps that the country have. And to comply with that, the CRUISE and the early warning for all initiative is also very important to build the adaptive capacity and to provide the strong early warning systems. Therefore, together enable truly end-to-end systems. We have observation, so that based on that observation, the data and the climate service can be provided. In addition to this, the national the commitment from the government is also very important to provide conducive environment to have. That is the government of Ethiopia by itself is also played significant role in filling that gaps, having a very conducive environment, and also building tertiary data center is very important. That is how we collaborate the national capacity with the development partners. So we build the co-production, co-implementation, co-designing, and the co-financing issue from this point of view. The key lessons that we are learning from this project is the first one is complementary of matters. No single mechanism can avoid weather and the climate related hazards. So integration, collaboration is a very important, and it is also very important to consider a resource diversification by avoiding redundancy and overlapping. We can utilize the strong service deliberation and the national ownership and the partnership as a catalyst is very important. That was the way we can utilize any experience in Ethiopia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fentanyl. So avoiding, as you say, duplication, closing the gaps, and then fostering national ownership. Over to you, Miriam.
Thank you, Chair. Allowed me to start to respond to this question by his personal story. It's not a story read in the report. In 2017, I was working as a aeronautical weather forecaster in a private sector in Burkina Faso. At this time, the meteorologic information was provided by the private sector because the National Meteorological Agency don't have all the equipment to do that. And 10 years after, I'm here as a Director General of the National Meteorological Services, and we are operating more than 300 automatic stations, in moreover 10 synoptic stations, lighting station, and also we are running a numerical model of more than 3 kilometers. And all of these achievement is due to cooperation and project, starting with cruise. I just point the year 2027 because cruise knows begin in Burkina Faso in 2027. What is a coincidence? And 10 years after, you can just, yeah, I have, you have the result. So cooperation and project as Mr. President has said, needs not to be overlapping. It's used as a booster because sometimes when you just talk to government about need of meteorological and national meteorological agencies needs, it's sometimes difficult because there are a lot of needs in every sector. But when a project comes, it's a booster and it can just help the government to put some funds. When we take also about project, people are just thinking we just here and wait for money. No, government is just putting money in some fund like green GCF fund. We have benefit from that with Hydromet project, which we help us to modernize our National Met Agency. Now we have a high performance computing. A high performance computing, we help us to run our model and to have 3 kilometer output in Burkina Faso. And also 9 kilometer output in Burkina Faso and for our neighboring Niger and Mali. And also what I want to point out is, as President has said, we need to have a government commitment to push national meteorological agencies and also to have WMO technical assistance. But to all of these projects, we have the assistance of WMO will help us to achieve all these. And after cruise, we have GCF, and also now we have just looking for soft initiative. I was talking, we have more than, for synoptic Gibbon compliance station, we have around 10. And for automatic station, we have more than 300. So we have some issues of maintenance and also how to maintain this station, how to make this station disseminate information in the forecast system. Because when you just go to WKMS website, you see that Burkina Faso is emitting information for global weather forecast. So helping countries to upgrade the technicals and their experience to fulfill their mission, having better forecast, reliable forecast for people. For me, it's a national commitment, but it's also a global commitment. But as you know, atmosphere don't have a limit. And things which is going in, I am a Met. All my life I have doing Met. So I know that when you have inside 30 north and 30 south, we have all the energy of the atmosphere here. And what is that doing, what is that going to occur in this region will affect the other region. This means that This project help the other region we don't have means to get up. So we cannot just, we need to promote helping the other to get around, because in climate, in meteorological services, it's not like a mother you are going fast and letting the other behind, because when you let the other behind, the climate effect will show you that we need to slow down. Maybe if you don't slow down, we need to get the other go faster as you. So these all projects combined help us to go faster and to be at the same speed as the other big centers about weather forecasting and all stuff. National commitment also help us very, very nicely. This day we have, the government has taken some arrêté to have a dedicated fund for national meteorological services. This is like a use point for us as national meteorological centers, because it's about resource mobilization, local resource mobilization, how to combine these resources with project resources to achieve our goals. So, Mr. Chair, it's what I want to share with you.
Thank you very much, Miriam, for that inspirational personal story and that accelerated modernization, which is remarkable. I have to say, so congratulations on that achievement. I was fixated while listening to you. And what I've taken from your story is, I mean, the incredible achievement, but also the method by which you created the conditions to provide the use cases that then provide the evidence to government, so the government can fund you and support you, and then combining the project money with other operational sources and sources of funding to drive that capability. And as Fentine pointed out, always avoiding duplication, closing the gaps, and ensuring that there is that national ownership. So that's a really strong theme. So thank you very much, Fentine. Thank you very much, Miriam. Very inspirational story. So next, in the few minutes that we have left, we're going to look at life from the donor's perspective, and we have Professor Martin van Aalst, who's the permanent representative of the Netherlands, and then we have Cecile Siwu, who's the permanent representative of Canada. And so again, as I've done before, I'm going to give you one question, and I'm going to leave it between the two of you in the 12 minutes we've got left to give us an answer or your response to the question anyhow. So from your experience as both donor countries and technical partners within WMO mechanisms, why is compliance with WMO regulations and standards not merely a technical requirement, but a comparative advantage of WMO for members and partners? And how can technical partners and donors best support that vision into the future? Over to you guys.
So I don't end up being the last one between everyone and the break. Is my microphone on? That's great. So no, this has been a fascinating panel and discussion to be part of, and it's been really informative and instructive hearing what the leaders, the people who lead the cruise and SOF and the WMO Commons, what they've shared with us and unpacked with respect to what those financing mechanisms contain, and also hearing from the different countries in different parts of the world. So let me start then with a simple point. So from Canada's perspective, the WMO standards are not just technical benchmarks. They represent a shared global ambition. They set the bar for what a trusted, effective hydrometeorological system should look like, and they underpin a public good. So in today's increasingly competitive and data-rich environment, that really matters. Standards also represent a comparative advantage in that they position members and partners as trusted and credible actors by signaling quality and consistency and enabling interoperability and ensuring that the data and services we provide are reliable and actionable for governments, communities, and individuals. And I think we already heard some really good examples of that trusted role from both from Evan in Jamaica and also from what Miriam shared with us in Burkina Faso and from Fenton in the Horn of Africa. So, but we also do need to be pragmatic in that we all face different challenges in meeting those standards. Even for Canada, which is the second largest country in the world, I might add, geography plays a role. We have a vast territory. We have remote and northern regions, diverse conditions that make it complex and resource intensive to maintain observing networks, deliver consistent services to all our citizens. For many countries, therefore, for some countries, the barriers can be far greater, whether financial, technical, or institutional. And for some, meeting even the minimum requirements of the WMO standards is difficult without the sustained support from these different financing mechanisms. So if we see these standards as a global good, the key question then becomes, how do we ensure that all countries, especially those with financial constraints, have the baseline capacity to work towards them? And that's where we as donors and partners have an important role in helping make that comparative advantage accessible to all members. So first, we need to be strategic. In a context of growing fiscal pressures and geopolitical complexity, resources are limited and needs are increasing. So we have to focus on where investments can have the greatest impact, particularly in the critical elements of the system: observations, forecasting capacity, and most importantly, in the ability to translate that into actionable life-saving warnings. And this is where initiatives such as CRUISE is particularly valuable. As a member and the current chair of the CRUISE Steering Committee, Canada sees the importance of supporting the entire early warning value chain from observation and data through to forecasting, risk information, and the last mile delivery. That end-to-end approach is essential if we want to move beyond incremental progress and achieve transformative change across hydrometeorological and early warning systems, working through strong partnerships across the UN system and beyond. And again, just reflecting on what one of the panelists said, Miriam reflected the changes that have happened in Burkina Faso over the past 10 years with the support of the financing mechanisms to strengthen the national institution. Importantly, CRUISE is most effective when it works alongside other complementary mechanisms within the WMO ecosystem, each addressing different parts of the system and responding to different needs while reinforcing a shared objective. This reflects WMO's unique comparative advantage, which is its ability to bring together globally agreed standards, operational systems, and a convening role that ensures investments are interoperable, scientifically robust, and sustainable over time. And that is precisely why Canada prioritizes working through the WMO and its strategic partners, including CRUISE and SOF, to help ensure that investments strengthen not only individual projects, but the broader systems and institutional foundations that sustain them. Because ultimately, this is not just about systems or standards, it is about saving lives and protecting livelihoods. Secondly, we need to make sure we maximize the impact of every dollar. There are many strong initiatives and partners working in this space, and each brings important value. The opportunity is to ensure that these efforts complement one another and contribute to stronger and more sustainable outcomes at the country level. Through CRUISE, we've seen the benefits of working in a coordinated, demand-driven way, aligning support with national priorities, reinforcing WMO frameworks, focusing on solutions that can be sustained and scaled over time. And finally, I would emphasize that everyone that plays a role in this has something to contribute. Donors provide financing, technical partners bring expertise, and countries themselves lead implementation and innovation. Progress depends on how well we align these contributions toward a common objective. So to conclude, for Canada, WMO standards are not an end in themselves. They are an enabler. They enable stronger systems better services, and more effective cooperation. Our collective task, therefore, is to ensure these standards are achievable and that in working toward them, we deliver real results for the people who need them most.
Thank you very much. And Martin, you have 4 minutes left. There you go.
All right, and I'll refrain from my notes, which is actually risky because they were timed to your original task. But I think I'm fortunate that I'm at the end of a panel that has said a lot of what I would have said. So it's very clear we've got some really awesome programs that are already delivering at a scale to something that maybe to begin answering your question, Owen, I see not just something that is an advantage in selling a program to a donor, but is helping us deliver our critical work. And that begins for me at home in the Netherlands, where we currently also, like here, have a code orange for extreme heat. For that to be the best possible warning, but also a trusted warning, I rely on these standards and these ways of collaborating, these ways of sharing observations, these ways of sharing solutions and tooling and technologies every single day. And that sharing goes beyond the responsibility to have our standards and to exchange our data. It's also a common global responsibility for how we look at the shared role that we as a meteorological community play in the world. And to me that, and again, it comes back to Cecile's point as well, it's not the standards that make our offer attractive. It is that critical role that we play. And then the standards are a means to that end. The fact that we run them so well is our advantage. The fact that we talk about them so much in so many acronyms and that we siloize it in so many different programs with their own acronyms and that sometimes compete with themselves is our biggest pitfall. So we need a narrative that essentially is a narrative about what I do for my citizens at home and make it logical that we have a shared responsibility for all citizens in the world to some extent. And even that it helps me with observations made all around the world, even for my task at home. So to me, that is a critical message also for the programs that we have that are so successful. I think we can still do better aligning. And I like the framing of commons. It's good that we have a financing vehicle for some of these critical underlying tasks of the WMO itself. I see the commons actually even more as an umbrella over all of these programs that we have that address this global common good we need to create. And once again, it's not yet optimal in how we deliver all of that. I would say, sorry, I'll just go to my intervention here. What we've learned in the Water at Heart program, where the Netherlands has been contributing 50 million originally, 5 million added recently, with a big component to solve. That was not something that was logical to our Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the beginning. Why would we be funding observations when the actual interest is about saving lives in that last mile? We were able to convince them that it's a package that has all these pieces together that we need to deliver as a global community. But it was only because of the package. And that package in this case also included UNDRR and the Red Cross Red Crescent network. So I think that's another message learned from Early Warnings for All. And I think we have the coming year also to reinvent how we continue the narrative around Early Warnings for All as the current mandate of the Secretary General, but also the original deadline of Early Warnings for All in 2027 is nearing. I think we have a lot of work to do there still. All these pieces of our global comments contribute to that. And I think it's a very convincing story that in the end builds on all these technical requirements, but ultimately sell because they deliver for the citizens of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, and I apologize for my tardy chairing to leave you at the end with just 4 minutes. But I'm glad I did, because your summary was so good. I have to say, it means I don't have to make a closing statement. I will say that it's interesting that you brought up the topic of a narrative and providing the logic of a narrative to ourselves, but also to our funding partners and our governments who fund either nationally where the development capability is happening, or to funding nations like the Netherlands and Canada, to be able to, so they understand that what we are doing collectively is part of a coherent global package that works. that relies on the same standards that we apply everywhere around the world. So that's a wonderful narrative to have. Thank you very much. In the remaining few seconds that we have, if you don't mind, I might hand over to the Secretary General to perhaps reflect and close this particular item. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's hard to reflect on so many comments here, and I will not add that much. Maybe just to connect the previous discussion during on the resource mobilization and how important it is, and the communication, how important it is for us to really convey the right message of the importance of what we do. In terms of how the organization moves forward the next strategic plan, and the importance of connecting all these dots. In the end, this is a network. I will use some of the keywords here. Citizens worldwide. I see a lot of strength in that concept. And also the idea that everything can be improved in how we connect the different mechanisms, and the role of the WMO as also as a catalyst, because in the end we bring different partners, we allow them to speak together, to connect, and to bring the best of the worlds to work together. I will also invite you to be more curious and ask more questions the next time we have this panel, because in the end, I know, because then you come to my office and you say, how can you help me? I need more X, Y, or Z. And I would like that to be translated into this space where we can collectively find answers together. I know many countries need more. I know that some donors are able to support in different ways, and sometimes it's not clear what's the right avenue to do so. So this is a space for a dialogue, for enhanced dialogue, and I hope that in the subsequent events that we will organize around resource mobilization, you will be asking more and requesting more from us, and also bringing your own ideas and concerns. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Celeste. So I'd like to thank everybody here who has told this wonderful story about what we can do together as partners when we engage in this remarkable global cooperation, and when we manage to gear and leverage the remarkable technical capability that is the WMO. Look what can be done. Thank you very much.
It's not going to give us the chair. So. Yes, we have some announcements. Okay. All right. Yeah. So we've got a couple of announcements. Please.
We have an announcement. Apologies.
Yeah.
We have
Thank
an
you very
announcement.
much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a couple of announcements. One of them.
Sorry, we have an announcement. I should have directed your attention to the practical arrangements. Over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So a couple of announcements. We have one side event in Salle B on the draft strategic plan 2028-2031. While the session is scheduled for 1 hour, it might be extended a little bit, just to give you a little bit of warning. The Zoom link has been already sent for the side event, which is scheduled from 5 to 6. And regarding the IMO price voting tomorrow, you're going to be receiving a link this evening. And if you can't get the link for the EC members and the alternates supposed to be voting, just please contact at registration@wmo.int. Thank you.